Hello again. Whenever I have talked about possible differences in average intelligence between human populations, two things invariably crop up in the comments here. One is that people quote a worldwide survey of IQs, which is connected with a man called Richard Lynn. And the other is, of course, that I am called a racist for even discussing the possibility that there might be variations in intelligence. Here is the problem. On the one hand, Richard Lynn's work is both dubious and old. For example, his figures for the average IQ in Ethiopia were derived not from IQ tests of people in that country, but rather from testing some children in Europe of Ethiopian heritage who were at an institution for those with learning difficulties. This is the sort of problem which bedevils the figures that Richard Lynn produced on worldwide IQs. The other thing that we need to bear in mind is that none of those who suggest that I'm a racist for entertaining the very possibility of variations in intelligence across the world or between ethnic groups in Britain or America can point to any research which tends to disprove such a notion. In short, the whole idea may be nonsense, or it may be a very sound idea with far-reaching implications. The truth is, nobody has the least idea. This is far from being a satisfactory state of affairs. If those who do not think that there are any inherent differences, other than the purely physical, between different populations, feel that that's a good and accurate way of looking at the world, then why not simply conduct some large-scale testing and accumulate some reliable data? Then, when the subject of intelligence comes up, instead of talking in a disparaging way about people who support Victorian race science and hinting that this has all been disproved, those folks could just point to a series of culture-fair intelligence tests, non-verbal reasoning and so on, which show there is no difference between black children and white in Britain, between those in Kenya and others in Finland and so on. I wonder, does anybody ever ask themselves why this is not done, or why it has not been done? I've read all the recent books published in the last few years which purport to demolish modern racism and show why it's false. Books such as these, Rutherford's How to Argue with a Racist, and of course Angela Saini's The Return of Race Science. Now, there's a great deal in both those books about Richard Lynn and the shortcomings in his work, and about the magazine Mankind Quarterly, which he edited and so on. A lot about how awful the bell curve is. I'm sure some viewers have read Charles Murray's book, The Bell Curve. But absolutely nothing at all about demonstrating that there are actually no differences in average intelligence between different ethnic groups. This is odd because it would be a good knockdown argument, and yet it never appears in these books. I can think of two possible explanations. The first is that any such research would be political dynamite and nobody wishes to finance it or be associated with it, just in case the whole thing backfires and differences are found. That would explain why we never hear strong evidence that there is no difference in average intelligence between ethnicities. Another possibility, of course, is that research has been undertaken and found to confirm the view that real differences exist, and for this reason has not been published but simply buried. I think it fair to say that if evidence had been found to confirm the orthodox equalitarian hypothesis about race, then we would have heard all about it by now. And so the matter rests. The research that is quoted in books like The Bell Curve is often from Richard Lynn's work, or one or two other people, and there are very serious flaws in these data. But nothing exists which goes against the idea that IQs differ between populations in a country like Britain with many members of ethnic minorities, nor that there might be any difference, say, between Africa, Europe, and Asia. I will leave viewers to ask themselves why it might be that there is a lack of evidence to support the idea of equalitarianism, to support the idea that intelligence is equally distributed across all ethnicities and in every culture across the world.